My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 33. 11 years ago, my mother told our church I had abandoned her. She mailed my baby pictures back in a shoebox. On the top Christmas card, she wrote, "Dead daughters don't get Christmas cards." I put the box on the top shelf and did not mail another word back. 2 Sundays ago, she called me her daughter again in the fellowship hall, with a donation basket in her hands. But here's what my mother didn't know. The woman sitting beside the piano had kept every receipt with my name on it. That is why I'm telling you this now. If your family only remembers you when a bill lands on the table, stay with me and subscribe for stories told with dignity. Let me take you back to the first Sunday she erased me. 11 years earlier, I was still living 2 blocks from First Mercy Church, in the same town where everyone knew my mother's Sunday hat before they knew my name. That first Sunday started in her kitchen. My mother, Patricia Carter, stood at the ironing board in a cream suit. I was 22, holding the sleeve of her blouse so the cuff would not crease. My father had already left for the early service because he handled the coffee urn, which made him useful and invisible, the safest position in our family. Patricia checked the blouse seam with 2 fingers and said, "Again." So I pressed it again. That was how our house worked. At church, my mother remembered every surgery, every funeral, every casserole pan that needed to be returned. At home, kindness had office hours. It opened when someone else could see it. In our house, kindness was something my mother performed in public and rationed at home. She had a phrase for anything that made her look less perfect. "Respectable daughters don't make scenes." She said it when my college application money went toward choir robes. She said it when I came home from a double shift too tired to smile. She said it whenever the truth had the bad manners to speak in a daughter's voice. My father, Raymond Carter, rarely argued with her. He folded bulletins. He locked church doors. At home, he lowered his eyes when Patricia started in. I used to think silence meant peace. In our house, silence usually meant someone had decided I could carry the weight. Patricia could cry with strangers. I watched her do it. One Sunday, a woman named Mrs. Alvarez came to the fellowship hall with her hair still pinned from the hospital. Her husband had died before dawn. My mother crossed the room, took both of Mrs. Alvarez's hands, and said, "You will not sit alone." Then we went home, and I asked if she could drive me to the clinic because my throat had been swollen for 3 days. She set her purse on the counter and said, "Don't start." Another time, Patricia passed a love offering plate for a family whose power had been shut off. She put in $20 and made sure the bills were visible. That same week, she left a sticky note on the fridge telling me I owed her $8 for gas because she had driven me to community college. I paid it in quarters. After a funeral, she told a widow, "Family shows up before it is asked." In the car, I reminded her that she had missed my certificate ceremony for a committee meeting. She did not look away from the road. "Respectable daughters don't make scenes." That sentence followed me longer than any hymn. The only person at First Mercy who seemed to notice the distance between my mother's public hands and her private ones was Lillian Pierce. Lillian had been the church treasurer before I was old enough to spell treasurer. She was in her 70s by then, small, square-shouldered, and allergic to nonsense. She always sat near the piano with a ledger, a pencil, and a purse that snapped shut like a warning. She did not pity me. I liked that. One afternoon, after the funeral dishes were washed, I stayed behind to stack chairs. My mother had gone to the front steps to talk with the pastor's wife. I was carrying 2 chairs at once, because doing 2 jobs quietly was one way I had learned to be allowed in the room. Lillian looked over her glasses and said, "You know you are allowed to put one down." I said, "I'm fine." She said, "Fine is not the same as held." I remember that because nobody in my family had used the word held about me before. She reached into the drawer of the old piano bench and handed me a clean envelope. "If you ever need a record, keep the paper." I thought she meant bills. Or taxes. Something practical. Lillian always sounded practical, even when she was handing you a lifeline. I kept the envelope. The break came in August, after Sunday service, during what the women called coffee hour and what I called standing around, while my mother decided which version of me the room was allowed to see. I had just taken a tray of lemon bars out of the church kitchen when I heard my name. Patricia was near the bulletin board with 3 women from the prayer chain. She had one hand on her throat, the way she touched herself when she wanted to seem wounded. "Naomi is hard to manage," she said. "She has always needed a little more correction than other girls." I stopped behind the half-open kitchen door. One of the women said, "She seems so quiet." My mother smiled. Quiet is not the same as respectful. I set the tray down before my hands could shake. That evening, in our kitchen, I asked her not to talk about me that way at church. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam a cabinet. I said one sentence. "Please don't make me sound like a problem you survived." Patricia turned from the sink with a wet spoon in her hand. My father was at the table, peeling the label off a bottle of iced tea. He looked at the spoon. He did not look at me. My mother said, "Respectable daughters don't make scenes." I said, "This is not a scene. This is me asking you to stop lying." The spoon went still. 2 days later, I came home from my shift at the assisted living center and found a shoebox on the porch. It was the blue box from my first pair of church shoes. Inside were my baby pictures, my baptism certificate, the little paper angel I had made in 2nd grade, and every birthday card I had ever given her that she had not thrown away. There was no note. The locks were not changed. Not yet. That came 3 days later. My father stood behind the screen door when I tried my key. I could see his shirt through the mesh. He kept one hand on the inside latch. He said, "Your mother thinks space is best." I asked, "Do you?" He looked toward the kitchen before he answered, "Don't make this harder." That was all he gave me. I slept that week on a coworker's couch. Her dog kept stepping on my ribs in the middle of the night. I remember that detail because it was the first warm body in 7 days that did not ask me to deserve its nearness. In December, I sent a Christmas card. I wrote 3 lines. I said I hoped they were well. I said I had an apartment in Columbus. I said I was not angry enough to stop being their daughter. The card came back after New Year's. Patricia had opened it. She had written across the inside in blue church office ink, "Dead daughters don't get Christmas cards." She had underlined dead twice. I put the card in the shoebox. I placed the box on the top shelf of my closet. Then I went to work. A daughter can stop begging without becoming cruel. By spring, I was working nights with an elderly man named Mr. Landry. He needed help walking from his bed to the blue recliner by the window. He called every nurse kiddo, even the ones older than him. He taught me how to listen to pain without making it louder. The work suited me. People needed, their pills sorted, their sheets changed, their coffee made the way they could still recognize. Nobody applauded. The proof was simple. A person was safer when you left than when you arrived. One Tuesday, I heard from a woman I had known at First Mercy that my father had missed 2 weeks of service because of blood pressure problems. That night, I bought a money order for $75. I made it out to First Mercy Church with Raymond Carter medication help on the memo line. I did not trust my mother with a check from my new address. I did trust church records. I mailed it to Lillian Pierce. 3 days later, my phone rang from a number I did not know. Lillian said, "Naomi, I received your envelope." My throat closed around her name. She did not ask why I had not called home. She did not ask what I had done to upset my mother. She said, "I will see that it goes where you marked it." I said, "Thank you." Then she said, "And Naomi, keep your copy." I did. I kept the receipt in the shoebox with the card. More followed. Not because I was noble, and not because I was stupid. I sent money when I could live with sending it. I did not send myself with it. My mother could refuse my voice. She could not make me pretend I had no hands. In July, I sent $40 toward the electric bill after a storm knocked out half the east side of town. In October, I sent $120 for a prescription copay after Lillian called and said my father had been switched to a different medication. The next winter, when Patricia had a small procedure and the church prayer chain passed around a meal calendar, I sent a grocery card through the office and signed nothing but my initials. Every time, Lillian mailed back a small note with the receipt clipped to it. No sermon. No advice. Just paper. At First Mercy, my mother told another story. Naomi had walked away. Naomi had become proud. Naomi did not call. Naomi had broken her father's heart. Sometimes she added that I had always been difficult. Sometimes she said the city had changed me. She never said $75. She never said copay. She never said grocery card. The lie was cleaner without receipts. Years passed like that. I moved from night shifts to scheduling. I learned which caregivers showed up early, and which ones only sounded kind on the phone. I learned how families behave when a parent gets sick, and the bill is real. By 31, I had my own home care service with a rented office, a used printer, and 18 employees who trusted me to make payroll on Fridays. I was not rich. I was not famous. I was just no longer easy to corner. Every December, I took the shoebox down. I did not reread everything. I only added the new receipt if there was one. Then I put the box back. The top shelf became less like a wound and more like a locked drawer. I knew what was in it. I did not need to stare. Then, 11 years after my mother mailed my daughterhood back to me, a cream-colored postcard arrived at my office. It had First Mercy Church printed across the top. Under that was my mother's name. Help Patricia Carter. With $64,300 in medical debt. A mother abandoned. A church standing with her. I read it once. Then I read the last line again. The postcard did not shake in my hand. I remember that. My hand was steady. My mother had not called me in 11 years. She had not asked if I was safe, hungry, sick, or happy. But somewhere in that town, she had looked at a hospital balance and decided I was alive enough to pay it. I put the postcard beside the shoebox. Then I called Lillian Pierce. I called Lillian before I called my mother. That choice mattered. The postcard sat on my desk between a payroll folder and a stack of care schedules. It looked polite there. Cream paper, blue lettering, a little cross in the corner. Help Patricia Carter. With $64,300 in medical debt, a mother abandoned, a church standing with her. I read that line until the words stopped looking like words. Then I checked the return address. First Mercy Church. Same building. Same town. Same woman using the same room to tell a different version of me. I dialed the number I still had for Lillian Pierce. She answered on the third ring. "This is Lillian," I said. "Mrs. Pierce. It's Naomi Carter." The line went quiet, but not empty. Lillian said, "I wondered when that postcard would find you." I looked at the printed amount again. "So you knew," Lillian said. "I knew they were planning a fundraiser. I did not know what sentence they printed until yesterday." I asked, "Did my mother approve it?" Lillian said, "She gave the wording to the office." I asked, "What story is she telling?" Lillian did not soften it. "She says the hospital bills came after years of heartbreak. She says you left town and cut them off. She says she has prayed for you every Christmas. Every Christmas." I turned my chair away from the office door. "Does she say I sent money?" Lillian said. "No." I asked, "Does she say you handled it?" Lillian said, "No." I asked, "Do you still have the records?" Paper moved near the phone. "I have copies of what came through the church office. I also have the envelopes I kept for you." I asked, "For me?" Lillian said, "You were 22. You did not know yet how often people rewrite women who stay quiet." I closed my eyes, just once. Then I opened them and looked at Friday's payroll list. 18 names. 18 people who expected me to be steady. "When can I come?" I asked. Lillian said, "Tomorrow morning. Come to my house, not the church." The next morning, I drove back to my hometown for the first time in almost 6 years. I passed the Dairy Queen and did not slow down at our old street. That was enough memory for one drive. Lillian lived in a brick duplex behind the library. She opened the door before I knocked. She was smaller than I remembered, but her eyes had not retired. She looked at me and said, "You look like someone who signs checks now." I said, "I mostly sign timesheets." She said, "Same discipline. Come in." Her kitchen smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. She had cleared the table. In the center sat a gray shoebox with masking tape across the lid. In Lillian's square handwriting it said, "Naomi Carter Records." I did not touch it. Lillian opened the box herself. Inside were copies, money order stubs, church deposit slips, notes clipped to receipts, envelopes with my handwriting on the front, and First Mercy's stamp on the back. Some were faded. Some still looked new enough to accuse someone. Lillian placed the first one on the table. $75. Raymond Carter medication help. Then another. $40. Electric bill. Then another. $120. Prescription. Copay. She laid them down in a line, year by year, like steps across water. I kept my hands in my lap. She told them I never looked back, I said. Lillian said. I know. I said. She told them I left her alone. Lillian said. I know. I said. She wrote dead daughters on my Christmas card. Lillian looked at the box. I know that too. She reached beneath the records and removed a clear plastic sleeve. Inside was a photocopy of the card. My mother's blue ink crossed the center. Dead daughters don't get Christmas cards. The underline was still there. Twice, Lillian said. I made a copy when you sent the first money order. You mailed the card back to me with the receipt. You wrote that if anything ever happened to your father, you wanted proof that you had tried. I had forgotten that. Not the pain. The paper. At 22, I had still believed proof might someday make my mother fair. At 33, I knew proof did not make cruel people kind. It only stopped them from recruiting a room. I picked up the plastic sleeve. My hand stayed steady. Does Pastor Daniel know? I asked. Lillian said. He knows Patricia's version. I asked. Does he know there is another one? Lillian said. He suspects there is a reason I asked to handle the pledge table myself. I looked up. You asked? Lillian said. I did. Your mother wanted one of her committee ladies there. I told Pastor Daniel that money raised under a personal hardship should have clean records. A dry laugh came out of me before I could stop it. You said clean records to my mother? Lillian said. I said it to the pastor. Your mother was within hearing distance. Lillian could be a blade when she chose. She just kept the blade in a cardigan pocket. We spent the next hour sorting paper. Receipts by year. Cards by year. Envelopes by year. Lillian gave me 2 copies of everything, and kept the originals in her lockbox. She slid one copy set into a plain folder. No dramatic color. No label big enough to be seen across a room. Just my name in the corner. Naomi Carter. For years, my mother had used my name like a stain. On that folder, it looked like a fact. Before I left, Lillian touched the lid of the box and said, You do not have to attend that fundraiser, I said. I know. She said, You do not have to rescue her. I said, I know that too. Then she said, But if you go as the woman who kept the receipts, not as the girl who kept waiting outside the door. That sentence came home with me. I drove back to Columbus with the folder on the passenger seat. Halfway there, my phone rang. The screen showed a number with my old town's area code. I answered. My mother said, Naomi. She did not say hello. She said my name like she was testing whether it still belonged to her. I said, Patricia. A pause. Short. Sharp. She said, I'm your mother. I said, I know who you are. Another pause. She recovered fast. Her voice warmed itself by force. I heard you received the invitation. Pastor Daniel says you may be coming. I said, I received the postcard. She said, it would mean a great deal if you were there. This has been a very difficult season for me. I waited. She filled the silence. The bills are overwhelming. $64,300, Naomi. I don't know what kind of money you think I have. I looked at the folder on the seat. I know the amount. She said, and I know you have done well for yourself. People tell me things. There it was. Not pride. Inventory. She did not ask how I had been. She asked around my life and found its price. I said, I run a small business. That is not the same as having money to hand out. She said, don't be vulgar. This is not about money. I asked, what is it about? She said, family. The word came out polished. Then the old sentence returned, clean as a knife pulled from a drawer. This is not the time to be difficult. Respectable daughters don't make scenes. I looked at the road. I'll be there, I said. Her breath changed. She thought she had won. Good, she said. People need to see that we are healing. I asked, we? She said, yes. And Naomi, it would be appropriate for you to sit where people can see you, near the front. Not too near the front, of course. I don't want anyone overwhelmed. That meant visible enough to spend, not close enough to belong. I asked, and there will be pledge cards? She said, of course. I asked, will you speak? She said. A few words. Pastor Daniel asked me to share my heart. I had heard my mother share her heart before. It usually meant someone else would be assigned the blame. She lowered her voice. It would also be meaningful if you made the family gift first. People follow courage. There was no courage in what she was asking. There was only choreography. I said, I'll think about it. She said, you have always thought too much. I said, no, I learned to think in writing. She did not understand that. I did not need her to. After we hung up, I pulled into a gas station and wrote down everything she had said. The call was not the weapon. It was a map. My mother had shown me where she planned to stand, what she planned to say, and how she planned to use me. On Monday, I called First Mercy Church. Pastor Daniel Reeves came on the line with the careful warmth pastors use when a call may become a problem. He said, Naomi, I am glad you reached out. Your mother will be very moved to see you. I asked. She told you I was coming? He said. She hoped. Hope was a flexible word in church offices. I need to ask about the fundraiser, I said. Will there be public giving? Pastor Daniel said. We will pass pledge cards, yes. No one will be pressured. I asked. Will my mother speak about me? A pause. Then he said, she may speak about the pain your family has endured. I said, that is not the same question. His voice changed slightly. Less pastoral. More awake. What are you asking me exactly? I said. I'm asking whether people will be invited to give money because they believe I abandoned her. The line stayed quiet. Finally he said, Mrs. Carter has described a long estrangement. I said, she has. He said, and you see it differently. I said, I have records. I did not say what kind. I did not say how many. I did not say Lillian's name until he did. Mrs. Pierce mentioned she would be handling pledge records that evening, he said. I said, she should. Another silence. This one had weight. Naomi, he said, is there something I should know before Sunday? I said, yes. But not over the phone. That was not revenge. It was order. If my mother wanted a room, there would be a room. If she wanted a basket, there would be a basket. If she wanted my name in the story, then my name would arrive with paper beside it. By Wednesday, the town had started doing what small towns do. It sent little pieces of itself ahead. A woman I barely remembered messaged me online. She said she was praying for reconciliation. A cousin of my father's left a voicemail saying medical bills humbled everyone. Someone from the church choir wrote, your mother has suffered enough. None of them asked what had happened. That used to make me furious. Now it told me the machinery was running. Patricia had wound the key, and the little figures were moving around the box. On Thursday night, I opened my office cabinet and took out my own shoebox. The blue cardboard had softened at the corners. Inside were the baby pictures, the returned cards, and my copies of the receipts. Lillian's folder sat beside it now, cleaner and flatter and harder to dismiss. I did not take the baby pictures with me. Those were not for the room. Those were mine. I took the Christmas card. I took the receipt copies. I took the postcard with $64,300 printed under my mother's name. Then I put everything in a plain manila envelope. No ribbon, no speech, no decoration. At the top, I wrote one sentence. For the record. On Friday morning, Pastor Daniel called again. His voice had lost the extra warmth. Mrs. Pierce has asked that the pledge table be placed beside the piano, he said. I said, that seems wise. He said, she also asked that all first gifts be recorded before being announced. I said, also wise. Then he said, Naomi, your mother believes you are planning to make a generous contribution. I said, I am planning to bring what belongs in that room. He did not ask me to explain. That afternoon, my mother texted me for the first time in 11 years. Wear something soft. People are emotional. I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. I'll wear black. She did not answer. That was the last quiet moment before Sunday. Sunday came with a clean sky and a church full of people ready to be kind. That was the part my mother had counted on. First Mercy looked smaller than I remembered. The brick steps were the same. The brass handles were the same. The bulletin board by the entrance still held prayer requests written in careful blue ink. I stood outside for 3 seconds with the manila envelope under my arm. Then I went in. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee, ham, and powdered lemonade. Folding tables ran in 2 long rows. Someone had set plastic tablecloths over them, the kind that stuck to your wrists if the room got warm. At the far wall, a white poster board leaned on an easel. Help Patricia Carter. With $64,300 in medical debt. Below the words was a donation thermometer, red marker already filled halfway to make the room feel behind before anyone sat down. My mother knew theater. I will give her that. She stood near the coffee urn in a pale blue dress with a white corsage pinned over her heart. The corsage looked too bridal for a fundraiser. It made her seem fragile from across the room, which was the point. People touched her elbow when they passed. She tilted her head. She accepted the touch like a blessing she had earned. Then she saw me. For 1 second, her eyes went to the envelope. Then they went to my dress. Black. The corner of her mouth tightened. She said, "Naomi, warm enough for anyone listening. You came," I said. I said I would. She leaned closer and kissed the air beside my cheek. Her lips did not touch me. We're going to keep today peaceful. That meant she had already decided who would be blamed if it was not. My father stood behind her with a stack of paper cups. He had more gray in his hair. His shoulders had rounded. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod, the kind you give a neighbor when you cannot remember whether you owe them money. I said, "Hi, Dad." He said, "Naomi." One word. No bridge. My mother touched his arm before he could add anything. "Your seat is over here." She led me to the table beside the piano. Not the family table, not the table near the pastor. A side table, close enough to be seen, far enough to be placed. Lillian Pierce sat at the end with a ledger, a pencil, and a small stack of blank pledge cards. The gray records box was not on the table. That was good. The first rule of a locked door is not showing everyone the key. At the piano table, Lillian had arranged 3 neat piles: blank cards, sealed envelopes, and a small brass bell to call people over when the giving opened. It was a harmless little bell. My mother had chosen it anyway. She wanted sound when money moved. I counted the tables without meaning to. 9 tables. 8 or 9 people at each. Enough witnesses for shame to work if I let it. Lillian looked up and said, "Naomi." I said, "Mrs. Pierce." She slid 1 pledge card toward me. Her finger tapped it once, not loud enough for anyone else to notice. My mother noticed anyway. "Lillian is helping us keep everything proper," Patricia said. "Isn't that thoughtful?" I said, "Very." Patricia's smile held. Barely. At noon, Pastor Daniel stepped to the front after the last casserole dish landed on the serving table. He prayed over the meal, over healing, over burdens carried together. I bowed my head. I did not close my eyes. The clock above the kitchen door clicked through the prayer. At 12:10, the women from my mother's committee uncovered the food. At 12:20, people began eating. At 12:30, pledge cards moved from hand to hand. Small white rectangles, blue lines, a place for a name, an amount, and a note. Paper makes generosity feel official. The poster watched the room from the far wall. Every few minutes, a woman from my mother's committee walked over and colored the thermometer higher, even though no money had been counted yet. The red climbed because the room needed to believe it was climbing. On the printed program, the schedule waited in black ink. 12:45 family gift. 12:50 Patricia's testimony. 1:00 open giving. My name was not on it. My role was... I turned the program over and set it under my water cup. My mother crossed the room exactly at 12:41. She had the donation basket hooked over her arm. It was shallow and lined with white cloth, like the church had dressed up a demand and hoped nobody would notice the shape. The basket sat beside her hip, empty and patient. She stopped beside my chair. Pastor Daniel thought it might be meaningful if the family gift came first. I said, "No." Her smile did not move, but her fingers tightened around the basket handle. A woman across the table looked down at her plate. My mother lowered her voice. "Naomi." "Not here," I said. "Here is where you asked." She breathed in through her nose. "This is a hard day for me," I said. "I can see that," she said. "We have a chance to show people that time can heal." I looked at the pledge card, then I looked at the poster. Time did not print that sentence. Her eyes sharpened. "What sentence?" I did not answer. Lillian's pencil stopped. My mother leaned closer. The corsage brushed the edge of the table. "Do not embarrass me." That was the old house talking through a new dress. For a moment, the old command still knew where to land. My throat remembered the kitchen. My shoulders remembered the screen door. My hand remembered the returned card. Then I looked at the pledge card. A clean line waited there. My mother had always understood audiences. I had learned records. I picked up the pen. My mother relaxed too soon. I did not write a number. I wrote one line across the pledge card. I would like the records read before I give. Then I laid the pen down. Lillian took the card, read it, and placed it flat beneath her ledger. She did not smile. That would have been too much. She only turned the card once, so the line faced the pastor's table. It was a small move. It changed the room for me. For 11 years, my mother had been able to make my silence look like guilt. For the first time, my silence had a sentence attached to it. If you have ever been called back to a family table only when there was a bill under the plate, comment boundary below. Keep listening, because what my mother said next made the whole room look at my hands. At 12:45, Pastor Daniel began introducing the testimony portion. He said First Mercy believed in carrying one another's burdens. He said medical debt could frighten even the faithful. He said giving should always be truthful and free. On that last word, his eyes moved to Lillian's table. My mother did not see it. She was already walking to the microphone. She carried the donation basket with her. She liked holding it. It made need look holy. She set one hand over the corsage and looked over the room, as if the room belonged to her pain. I want to thank each of you, she began. Illness humbles a person. Debt humbles a person. But nothing humbles a mother like loving a child from a distance. My father stared at the floor. I watched the basket. Patricia continued. Some of you know that my daughter and I have had many quiet years. I have prayed through those years. I have set a place in my heart, even when there was no place at my table. That was good. Too good. I almost admired the craft of it. She let the line sit. A few people shifted in their chairs. One woman near the dessert table pressed a tissue under her eye. My mother had rehearsed where the room would soften. Then she looked at me. The room followed her eyes. I am grateful Naomi came today, she said. It means the door is not closed. The basket swung a little on her arm. She wanted me to stand. She wanted a hug, or a check, or at least a daughter shaped enough to fit the story. I stayed seated. My mother's jaw moved once. She tried one more smile. It was thinner now. I know pain can make people proud, she said. I know distance can make children forget what home means. Lillian's pencil rolled once across the ledger. I put my hand over the manila envelope. My mother saw that too. Then she laughed softly into the microphone. Dead daughters don't get Christmas cards, Naomi, but living ones can still come home. There it was, the sentence she thought she owned. She had wrapped it in a joke and set it in front of God, casserole dishes, and 73 pledge cards. I looked at Lillian. Lillian closed her ledger. Pastor Daniel stood up. Pastor Daniel did not rush, and that made it harder for my mother to call it confusion. He buttoned his jacket and looked at the table beside the piano. Mrs. Pierce, he said, do you have the records Naomi requested? Lillian rose slowly. She did not look theatrical. She looked prepared. Her pencil stayed tucked behind her ear. Her ledger remained closed under one hand. With the other, she reached beneath the table and lifted the gray records box onto the white plastic cloth. My mother's mouth changed first. Not the whole face, just the mouth. The soft curve she used for sympathy flattened into a line so tight that her lipstick cracked at one corner. Daniel, she said, still into the microphone. This is not necessary. Pastor Daniel kept his eyes on Lillian. If giving is truthful, records will not hurt it. That was the first sound in the room that did not belong to my mother. I stayed in my chair. My mother knew how to fight a daughter standing in the aisle. She knew how to make a raised voice sound unstable. She knew how to point to shaking hands and call them guilt. I gave her none of that. I kept both palms flat on the table and let Lillian open the box. Before Lillian touched the first sleeve, she rang the little brass bell once. The sound was small. It still carried. People turned because they had been trained all afternoon to turn when that bell meant money. This time, it meant a record. My mother heard the difference before anyone else did. Her shoulders pulled back. Her eyes went to the pastor, then to me, then to the box. I did not rescue her from the silence. For years, she had made silence my assigned seat. That afternoon, I let her sit in it. The lid came off with a soft pull of tape. No one spoke. Lillian took out a clear plastic sleeve and placed it on the table nearest the microphone stand. Inside was the Christmas card. My Christmas card. The one I had mailed after the locks changed. The one my mother had opened and returned. The blue ink cut across the middle. Dead daughters don't get Christmas cards. A woman at the dessert table put down her fork. Lillian placed the second sleeve beside it. A money order receipt. $75. Raymond Carter medication help. My name sat on the purchaser line. Naomi Carter. My old apartment address sat beneath it. My father lifted his head. Lillian placed my smallest note beside the first receipt. It was only 6 words. Please make sure he gets this. No accusation, no speech. Just a daughter trying to reach her father through the only doorway my mother had not locked. That note did more damage than any speech I could have given, because it was not written for the room. It had been written when I thought no room would ever know. My mother had called that absence. The table called it evidence. Lillian placed 3 more receipts down in one careful row. $40 for the electric bill, $120 for a prescription copay, and a grocery card sent through the First Mercy office. Each one had a date. Each one had my name. Each one had passed through the church my mother used to bury me. Then Lillian set down one envelope. It was ordinary church mail. Cream paper, black postmark. First Mercy's stamp on the back. My handwriting on the front. Lillian pointed to the stamp. Received the same week, Patricia told the prayer chain there had been no contact. My mother snapped. Lillian. The name came out too sharp. It showed the room what her soft voice had been covering. Lillian did not flinch. I was treasurer. I kept records. Not I believe Naomi. Not Patricia is lying. Just the record. That was why it held. The room did not go silent all at once. It lost sound in pieces. The brass bell near Lillian's ledger stopped rocking. Someone had bumped the table and then frozen. A paper cup crumpled in a man's hand near the back wall. Pastor Daniel took off his glasses and held them by one stem. At the family table, my father's napkin slid from his knee and landed beside his shoe. My mother still had the basket on her arm. That is the image I remember most clearly. The donation basket hung there while the proof lay in front of her. One hand asking, one table answering. Pastor Daniel stepped closer to the records. Patricia, he said, did you receive these payments? My mother looked at the receipts as if they had been written in a language she had once known and hoped no one else could read. They were small, she said. The answer did not land the way she wanted. It made the room look back at the table. Small money still has a name on it. Small money still crosses a distance. Small money still tells the truth when a large lie stands at a microphone. Pastor Daniel asked his second question. Did you tell this congregation Naomi never helped you? My mother's fingers tightened around the basket handle. The white cloth inside puckered under her thumb. I said she left, she answered. Pastor Daniel said, that is not what I asked. She looked at me then. For 11 years, my mother had looked through me, around me, past me, and over me. In that moment, she looked at me as if I had finally become a locked door. I did not move. Lillian turned one more sleeve toward the room. It was the photocopy of the returned card. Beneath my mother's sentence was the church office stamp from the same month as the first money order. Lillian said, those came together. 4 words, clean as a cut. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. My father sat down without looking for the chair first. The metal legs scraped hard against the floor. At the far table, one of my mother's committee ladies slid her blank pledge card under her plate, as if hiding it could make it innocent. My mother lowered the microphone. It squealed once. Nobody laughed. Pastor Daniel faced the room. No pledge will be collected under a statement that has now been shown false. He lifted the donation basket from my mother's arm and set it upside down on the table. The white cloth fell over the rim like a small flag giving up. Then he gathered the pledge cards that had already reached Lillian's table and placed them back into the blank stack. All cards will be returned, he said. He turned to the side table where my mother's committee folder rested beside the coffee urn. The folder had a plastic tab with her name on it. Patricia Carter, Benevolence Chair. Pastor Daniel pulled the tab out of the sleeve and placed it inside his own folder. Effective immediately, Patricia will not handle benevolence pledges, care fund requests, or any signature tied to church aid until the board records this formally, he said. No money moves under a false statement. My mother's corsage trembled because her hand had started to shake. This was the part she had not planned for. The money was gone. The basket was closed. The chair she had used to look holy had just been taken in front of the people who had made it matter. I could have read every receipt. I could have named every December, every copay, every envelope that crossed from my hands to the office she trusted more than me. I could have made the room sit inside all 11 years. I did not. I took the Christmas card from the table and held it by the corner. I am not here to make my mother smaller, I said. My voice sounded calmer than my pulse. I am here to stop being erased. My father covered his eyes with one hand. Patricia whispered, Naomi. She said it without polish. For once, my name did not sound useful in her mouth. It sounded heavy. Lillian slid the remaining receipts back into the sleeve. She did not take them away. She left them visible. A truth removed too quickly can be turned back into rumor. A truth left on the table has weight. Pastor Daniel stepped down from the front and stood beside the records. Not beside my mother, beside the records. That was when Patricia understood the part that money could not fix. The fundraiser was gone. The basket was closed. Her name had come out of the benevolence folder in front of the same room that once trusted her to hold the pen. But the worst thing, for her, was simpler. I had not begged to be her daughter. I had brought proof that I had already been one. Not in memory. Not in theory. In blue ink, dates, and paper that could not look away. After the basket turned upside down, the fundraiser was over. Nobody announced it with a bell. Nobody needed to. The room understood the shape of a closed hand. The white cloth hung over the rim of the basket, and my mother stared at it as if the cloth had betrayed her. Pastor Daniel asked 2 deacons to collect the pledge cards already on the tables. He did not let anyone tear them up in front of my mother. He did not make a show of mercy either. He stacked the cards, tapped the edges square, and said each family would receive theirs back before they left. She had not only lost the money, she had lost the story that opened the money. The poster came down next. A woman from the church office lifted it off the easel and carried it toward the kitchen. The red donation thermometer still stopped halfway up the board, frozen at a hope my mother had not earned. When the woman reached the trash can, she hesitated. Pastor Daniel shook his head. "Keep it for the board packet," he said. My mother heard that. Her face changed again. She could survive gossip. She could survive whispers. A board packet was different. Paper had always been the one thing she could not charm after it was filed. Before I left, I saw her committee folder on Pastor Daniel's chair. The name tab was still out. It looked small there. Smaller than a corsage. Smaller than a basket. Big enough to end a roll. I left before the room emptied. Lillian walked me to the side door with the gray records box against her chest. She did not ask if I was all right. I was grateful for that. "Do you want the originals?" she asked. I said, "No. Keep them where they are safest." She nodded once. "Then I will." Outside, my father stood near the handicap ramp with both hands in his pockets. He looked older in daylight. Smaller, too. For a second, I saw the man who used to fold bulletins instead of choosing sides. "Naomi," he said. I stopped, but I did not step closer. He said, "I didn't know about all of it." That was almost true. Almost truths are where weak people like to rest. I said, "You knew enough to keep the door locked." He looked down at the concrete. "Your mother was hurt." I said, "So was I." He had no answer for that. Maybe he never had. 3 days later, Pastor Daniel called me with the kind of voice people use when they have been in a long meeting and have decided not to pretend it was short. The board had recorded the fundraiser as canceled. Every pledge card had been returned. Patricia had been formally removed from the benevolence committee. Her access to the church care account ended that week. Any aid request connected to her name had to go through 2 board members instead of her folder. He told me those facts carefully, one at a time. I did not celebrate. I wrote them down. The hospital debt remained in my mother's name. $64,300 did not vanish, because the truth arrived. It simply stopped wearing my face. That mattered more than I expected. For years, Patricia had used my absence as a kind of currency. She had bought sympathy with it. She had bought authority. She had bought a chair at the table where other families came with their own emergencies. After that Sunday, the chair was empty. The poster was in a packet. The basket went back into the supply closet without her hand on it. That was what $64,300 looked like when the story around it collapsed. My mother called me the following Thursday. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice sounded thinner without a room around it. "Naomi, I was hurt," she said. "You have to understand that. A mother does things when she is hurt." She did not say, "I lied." She did not say, "I used your name." She did not say, "I let people believe you abandoned me while you were helping us." She said she was hurt. I listened once. Then I saved the message, because old habits are hard to kill when paper has protected you. That night, I wrote her an email. I kept it short. I told her I would not pay the medical debt. I told her I would not attend any meeting meant to repair her image. I told her I wished her proper care, but I would not be the proof that she had become honest. If she needed to contact me again, she could do it in writing. I read it twice. Then I sent it. My hands did not shake. The next morning, I went back to my office in Columbus. A caregiver named Tasha was waiting by the printer with a timesheet problem and a coffee she had forgotten to drink. Someone had left a pack of sticky notes on my keyboard. The phone rang before I took my coat off. Life did not pause for my family's old lie. I liked that. At noon, I signed payroll. 18 names. 18 people who had shown up in other people's homes that week and done the quiet work nobody claps for until it is missing. One of them had asked for Christmas Eve off to sit with her mother after surgery. I approved it before lunch. That afternoon, I found a card on my desk. It was from Tasha. The front had a red cardinal in snow. Inside, she had written, "Thank you for making it possible for me to be with my mom." I stood there with the card open in my hand. For a moment, I was 22 again, reading blue ink across a Christmas card that had been sent back to me like a body returned unclaimed. Then the office phone rang. Someone laughed in the hallway. The printer kicked awake. The card in my hand was not asking me to disappear, so I placed it on the corner of my desk. A week later, I drove back to Lillian's house. She had coffee ready and the gray records box on the table. Beside it sat my old shoebox, the blue cardboard soft at the corners. "I think this belongs to you," she said. I looked at the box for a long time. For years, I had kept it on the top shelf like something dangerous. A little coffin for a daughter my mother had declared dead. But sitting in Lillian's kitchen, with sunlight on the tape and coffee cooling between us, it looked smaller. Still real, just smaller. I opened it. The baby pictures were still there. The returned cards were still there. The paper angel from second grade had lost one wing. Lillian did not fill the silence. She had always been good at letting truth breathe. I closed the lid and said, "I'm not putting it back on the top shelf." Lillian asked, "Where will it go?" I said, "In my desk." She said, "That sounds right. Not hidden. Not worshipped. Available if needed. Uninvited otherwise." Before I left, Lillian handed me one last envelope. Inside was a copy of the first receipt she had ever mailed back to me. $75. Raymond Carter medication help. Below it, on a sticky note, she had written, "You were never absent." I folded that note once and put it in my wallet. That was the warmest thing anyone from that church ever gave me. My mother and I did not reconcile in the way people like stories to reconcile. There was no holiday dinner with forgiveness passed around like rolls. There was no photograph where everyone leaned in and pretended the space had never existed. She sent 2 more emails. The first said she hoped I was proud of myself. The second asked whether I could at least help negotiate the hospital bill, since I understood these systems. I did not answer the first. To the second, I sent the number for the hospital billing office and wrote, "You will need to speak for yourself." That was not cruelty. That was the end of translation. I had spent too much of my life translating my mother's choices into something softer. She was tired. She was embarrassed. She was from a different generation. She did not mean it that way. Every translation had cost me a little more of my own language. I stopped paying that cost. Family, I learned, is not the person who calls you back when the bill arrives. Family is the person who keeps your name safe when a room is ready to believe the worst about you. Sometimes that person is not the woman who gave birth to you. Sometimes it is an old church treasurer with a pencil behind her ear, a gray box on her kitchen table, and enough sense to keep the paper. That is the family I believe in now. That's my story. 11 years. 1 shoebox, 1 returned Christmas card, and $64,300 that finally stopped using my name. If someone only remembers you when they need your check, you do not have to buy your way back into their love. You were not made to be an emergency fund with a heartbeat. Share this with someone who needs permission to keep the door closed. Comment: I don't have to pay to belong. If that sentence belongs to you. And subscribe for more stories about truth, dignity, and the kind of family that does not make you disappear before it asks you to give.